Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about LastPass Vaults. And LastPass Vaults has been in the news lately because they have actually been leaked. And LastPass has had a bunch of different breaches where personal information has been stolen, like addresses, emails, phone numbers, and so on. No credit card information, that is never stored at the actual provider. Usually there is other companies that handle those kind of information, but in this case the password vaults were also stolen, which is a little bit more complicated and hard for people that actually use LastPass. And I'm one of the users of LastPass, or was. I've actually switched off LastPass and transitioning all my passwords to the new provider. I'm not saying that you need to choose the same provider as me, and not even that you need to switch from LastPass, but you should have a password manager if you don't have a really clever way of generating password for each site, because you should have different passwords for all sites. So if you are one of those people that have monkey123 for all your internet needs, then please switch over and do a separate password per site. And if you can't generate and remember all this password for every site, then a password manager is a very good choice. Apple has one really good one in their platform if you are in their ecosystem. Otherwise, you have a bunch of different ones out there that you can choose from. 1Password, Bitwarden, and so on. Just do your research and find one that you trust. But in this case, they had been losing all the vaults. And I wanted to go through and see what kind of impact it has and what kind of information that they could actually get more over the actual vaults and what could they actually glean in the vaults. So if we switch over to my screen here, you can see that I have a vault. This is actually my vault. I have just picked out a couple of things from the vault so I can show you, and I also obfuscated some things so I don't really divulge any information here. So if you go to this address, lastpass.com/getaccounts.php, you will get your vault in this XML format. And they need to have it like that because you need to fetch your vault in order to decrypt it on your end. So it's not really a huge security breach that your computer can get your vault. That is something that they need to be able to do in order to actually serve you the service. So if you're logged in, go to this address, you will see your vault details. Nothing strange there. But what can some other ones see if they see your vault details? Well, if we open up the accounts here, we can see that I have one account example here. And in this, you have the name of the account. It is actually encrypted and it's salted. So one important thing to look at here is this exclamation mark. It actually says that it's encrypted with the latest version that is encountered doing cycles up to 100,000 times. The first version I think did it just one time, not really secure. Then they went up to 1,000 times, then went up to 5,000 times, and in the last iteration they were up to 100,000 times. And I really wanted to see in the vault if I could see that information somewhere that they're actually doing it 100,000 times, and I couldn't see it. But I guess my vault should be in that state. It's not that old. If you have the first part here before the actual pipe here, if you have the first part here before the pipe, it means that it is salted. So this is the salt value, this is base64 encoded, and then you have the password that is base64 encoded. And the salt is pretty much something that you put in front of your password, so the password becomes really long. And the reason they want to create really long, unique passwords for you is even though you might have a really good password, if you make it even longer, it takes much longer to decrypt. And if you have a password of, like, say, 8 characters, there is still a possibility that you could create a really large database with all the passwords in the universe pre-calculated and then just look up your hash and see which password it actually has. So in order to handle that problematic part, you can actually salt it with something that is large enough to say that, okay, the password plus this thing is so large and the combinations is so many that creating such a database is unfeasible. So that's why you're salting things. Other thing in here is that you have an ID, pretty much very standard, but then you have this URL, and this is just hex to ASCII of this specific value you see on screen here is Stack Overflow, which means that anyone that can open your vault or have your vault can decode all the sites you have visited and figure out what kind of things you are into. Most people don't really have any secrets in their vaults that they don't have in their history. But if you're a person that goes to places that you don't want to divulge to other people, and you have cleared your history, for instance, this is another avenue to actually get that information from you. So be aware. Then you can see here that you can put in some settings here if you auto log in, if it's a site that requires basic auth. That is a functionality in the browser, not actually on the page to log in. And then you have gen password, only if it's a bookmark, if it should never autofill this password. Last touched and last modified is really important, because last modified is the last time you modified this password, updated it. And last touched is last time you actually used it. And if you say, for instance, that I have never been to that site, or I haven't been to that site in years, and then it says yesterday here, then you have lied to somebody. Somebody can actually look in your vault and see, when did you last go to that site? And if somebody wants to find the targets that are easy to crack, they might look at sites that you haven't looked at for a long time that it is high targets. Perhaps that is a good way, or go to places that you have been often because they might be more important to you. And then we have this login part here, so you can have multiple logins to one site if you have multiple accounts. And you have seen, if you're using LastPass, this little counter that says how many passwords you can choose from. And the reason they have the URL here is actually to give you that functionality. So it can give you a functionality of saying how many logins are available, even though you haven't decrypted your vault. It's a feature, maybe you don't want it, but it's still there. Then you have the username and password up here. And then down here, you actually have a breakdown on which field it should put in which value. So in the email field, it should put in this username, I guess. And then in the password field, it should put in this name. I have seen in my vault that these have changed. There is a bunch of different values for fields that should be filled in. So they will be different on different sites. Then we have the never accounts and never auto login. So these are URLs where you have said that I don't want you to ever try to log in here. It's not really a site that I want you to keep track on. Then we have form fills, if you want to fill in address information or phone numbers or something like that automatically. I've never used that feature. Usually the sites I go to already know my stuff, or I can fill them in myself. I don't really need to store it in the password vault. I don't do that often. Then we have app accounts. I've used this exactly once. So this is actually my exe file, and this is the CMD exe in Windows. So it's just opening a command prompt and trying to do a git push. That was something I did a long time ago, trying to actually push using LastPass. It worked really bad. It failed often. So I've gone over to using a client key instead, which works much better for me. So this is not applicable anymore. But you can see the application name here. So if you have a bunch of different applications that you're running locally, then people can see which ones you have password for stored here. You can also see when you last used those applications with the password. Could be information that you don't want to share. And these are less important, of course, because you need to be locally in order to use them. And if somebody have stolen the password vaults on the internet, they can't really use these passwords. Then we have equal domain. These are domains that are similar enough so you can say that if you log into these kind of passwords and trying to use them on domains, and you go to different sounding domains but they are owned by the same company, you might have the same account on both, so you say that these are equal. And then we have URL rules. In this case here, you say that this specific URL needs to be at the exact host or the exact port. These can be set when you have information like, I go to a specific subdomain domain and I don't want you to look at any other of them. I need to be this specific one. And if you have multiple passwords that go to different parts of that, that could be an interesting thing to have. And then we have a bunch of configuration values down here that you have set if it should prompt you for site passwords and so on edit and so on. So it's more of a configuration part. So the important thing up here, it's the account information and the app account information, I would say. If there is any of this information that you feel that this is something that it really was sad that somebody else has now, well, that is a bummer and you should find a different host. When it comes to these actual passwords, how strong are they? Security experts have said that they reasonably should hold for 200 years of hacking. So if you're running with a reasonable amount of compute hardware, it should take an attacker 200 years to actually decrypt these. If that is true, then we shouldn't be that worried. But then again, so hardware gets faster and faster. And if you are a political figure or anyone else that are in a vulnerable situation, you maybe have the compute power of Google or somebody that is working for a state, then you might have more problems because they have a lot more compute power on their end. So then you would need to switch password manager, of course. I'm switching over. It takes a while when you have hundreds of passwords, of course, so it's a bit of a hassle. So this was what I wanted to cover today. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you learned something today. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave them down in the comment section down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. And I really hope to see you in the next video.